So I will turn that over to Maggie.
Well, the good news is we don't have to worry about calculating quorum because the Vermont legislature recently, sorry, I'm trying to remember where I am here. The Vermont legislature recently passed a motion to temporarily set the quorum to 5 from now until December 31st. So as long as we have 5 people here, which even just clearly online, we have 5 people, but we also have 5 people in this room, we are now allowed to officially make decisions via vote. So that you'll see later on the agenda that we're going to look over some items in the bylaws and discuss amending them and vote on one other item. But it's still good to do a roll call just to see which towns are here tonight and for official record keeping purposes and all of that good stuff. So with that, let's see, is everyone in? I think so. All right, so I will list off the towns, and if you hear your town's name, just take a moment to speak up and introduce yourself, please. And we'll try to make this real quick. So do we have anyone from Benson? Anyone from Brandon?
Tom Kelpeck, Brandon.
All right, thank you, Tom. Anyone from Castleton?
Mike Jones from Castleton.
Oh, Mike, hi. Sorry, didn't see you there.
All right.
Thank you, Mike. Anyone from Chittenden?
Jan Sudarakis, Chittenden.
All right, thank you, Jan. Anyone from Clarendon? Anyone from Danby?
Tom Johnston, Danby.
Thank you, Tom. Anyone from Fairhaven? Anyone from Hubbardton? Anyone from Ira? Anyone from Killington? Anyone from Mendon? Anyone from Middletown Springs? Anyone from Mount Holly? Anyone from Mount
Holly.
Oh, thank you, John. Anyone from Mount Tabor? I guess I should slow down a little bit. Anyone from Paulet?
Bob Morlino.
Thank you, Bob. Anyone from Pittsburgh? Anyone from Pulteney? Anyone from Proctor? Mike, are you with us yet? Doesn't look like it, so okay. Okay. Anyone from Rutland City? Anyone from Rutland Town?
Marty Wasserman, EMD.
Thank you, Marty. Anyone from Shrewsbury? Anyone from Sudbury? Anyone from Tinmouth?
Yep, Ray Pratt.
Ray Pratt, thank you, Ray. Anyone from Wallingford?
Angle.
Thank you, Jim. Anyone from Wells? Anyone from West Haven? And lastly, anyone from West Rutland? Okay. Thank you, everyone.
Out of curiosity, how many towns do we have in the county?
In the RRPC, we have 27 towns.
Well, thank you, Maggie. That's always helpful to know who's here. So we'll move on to approval of tonight's agenda, which Maggie has shared on your screen. If there are any additions, please state them now. If not, I'll entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
I thought Bob Molino wanted to change the agenda.
We have to approve the agenda first, but Bob, I don't know, Maggie, do we need to do something different for that?
I'm not 100% clear on that procedure. My thought was we could propose amendments and then vote on it to accept the agenda as it is with the proposed amendment.
Okay, we can do that. I know it has to be approved according to an open meeting law I just went to. So Bob wants to move the first item of business to his update on the state LEPC committee. Any other additions?
Right.
Motion to accept the agenda as altered or amended.
Okay, I have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Any opposed? All right, the agenda is approved. Do you want to do Bob's update next or move on to the minutes?
Approving the minutes should be relatively quick, unless Bob, you're itching to go first. Go ahead.
Sorry let me just pull over here for a second. I'm in my car. I'm coming back from Burlington, and I'm afraid I'm going to lose the signal. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. So, I thank you for indulging me in being able to change the agenda there. We attended the very first, I guess, LEPC meeting, statewide LEPC meeting. I don't have the exact date it was in front of me, but it was a couple of, about 6 weeks ago, maybe 8 weeks ago. So it was a relatively short meeting. It was more an organizational meeting to get things rolling. So the topics, we had a vote for chair. I was voted in as the chairman of the state LEPC. Then we rolled on to Patrick McLaughlin gave us, who's the chief of the hazmat team, hazardous material response team, as well as the tier 2, I will call it the tier 2 guru for the state of Vermont. He said, he reported that the tier 2 has been submitted. It has to be submitted, I guess, to the EPA. Tier 2 has been submitted. The tier 2 reports are available to emergency services. So if a fire department didn't get the tier 2 reports from the facilities in their town, they can contact Patrick McLaughlin and he could get you the tier 2 for your town. So it's available to any of the emergency services. It's generally not available to the public for security reasons, but it is available to all emergency services. He also had completed the emergency statewide hazmat plan that has to be done annually. It's been completed. He hasn't not submitted it. He hasn't sent it out yet. He'll be doing that shortly. And also the last item was he got approval for a full-time position. He has been wanting to get someone full-time to handle all of the tier 2 submissions and so on, so that he can be freed up to do a lot of the hazardous material work that he has to do. So he had got that position approved, and they're looking to fill that position soon, they hope. That's all I have for the LEPC.
Bob,
Go ahead.
That's a job that can be done remotely or from Waterbury.
I'm sorry, I didn't understand the question.
I'm curious, is that job going to have to be filled in Waterbury, or can it be done remotely?
Oh, no, that's a good question. I don't know the answer. I don't think it has to be in Waterbury. I mean, Patrick technically has his office in Waterbury, but he's hardly ever there because he just has to move all around the state. But I'm guessing that it can be done from home, but I don't really know.
Okay.
I don't know the answer to that.
I just want to make sure
Any
someone
other questions?
I just want to make sure someone in the room saw that Peter Mantelo is waiting outside your door.
Yes, I already sent someone down to let him in.
Perfect. Thanks.
Yeah, normally they're supposed to lock the doors at 6, but sometimes they don't lock the doors at 5:30. So. Okay, so
Any other questions? Sorry, go ahead.
No, if there's further questions from Bob, for Bob, I should say. I just got in touch with Michael. He is joining us via phone right now because he is having technical difficulties via computer. So I believe he's present right now, right, Michael?
I am, yeah, I am. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you perfectly. Thank you. Okay,
Cool.
so Michael, where we left off, we moved the LEPC report to the front as Bob is on the road right now and he wanted to deliver that before losing reception.
Okay.
So we have already approved the meeting agenda with that amendment. And the next item that we have is to approve the March 29th meeting minutes.
Okay, well, then I guess we're seeking a motion to approve the minutes from March 29th, 2023.
So moved.
Second. All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any opposed? All right, minutes pass. And then we can move along to announcements. Update on vulnerable population protocol.
Yep, so this is where I'll take over. I had to actually put together a set of slides because we have so much to cover. So I just want to update you on what we've been doing throughout the region lately. So the first major item of note is that we have updated the vulnerable populations communication protocol. As I've spoken about several times over the past few months, the protocol did not work as intended for the Christmas storm. So we had a working group come together to try to discuss what went wrong, what gaps there were, and how to prevent those things from happening in the future. So some of the major changes that we made, we added clear language to dictate the protocol scope. So there was ambiguity about whether this plan could be used for a longer term event or a more short term event. And we decided that it would make the most sense to have the protocol address a term event only, just based on the steps that are in the protocol. So we made that clear. We clarified the purpose of the vulnerable populations context in the LEMP. So there was confusion over whether that counted as a protocol or not. And essentially we added language to say that the LEMP vulnerable populations are basically a list of contacts. It's more to be used like a phone list for in preparation of a known event. But for the specific steps for the protocol itself, you will want to refer to the document rather than the LEMP. We also emphasized communication with social service agencies in advance of a known incident. This was language that was already in the document, but I just kind of made some underlines, made some extra emphasis at the end of the second paragraph there. And lastly, the reporting back procedures. So these were modified to allow for legal limitations, primarily those imposed by HIPAA. This was mostly for the hospital's sake, but also for any social service agencies. If they did not have a signed waiver by a patient to share their health information in an emergency, then they are legally not allowed to do that. So we created a contingency in that fifth step there, as you can see to the right, where agencies such as the hospital or those without waivers, if they don't have the arrangements allowing them to share that information, then they're allowed to end the reporting procedure by simply saying that they executed their internal protocol. So next steps to follow up on building up this protocol as it stands. We are hoping to have an additional drill. We had the drill last month in May that went really well. It was a notice drill. My hope is to take that a step further by doing an unnoticed drill. So that would be mostly on the social service agency end, since the original scenario was EMD activation of the protocol. So I want to try it on an unnoticed basis to make sure it works at that next level of complexity.
So this has been approved, that's it, right? It's done?
This is done, yes, barring any minor adjustments made after a drill or any observations that are made to make it better.
After the drill?
Yes.
Did we get a copy of this?
Yes, I did. I believe I sent out a copy last month, but I would be happy to send it to you again.
Yeah, please. Because now that I know what I'm looking for in your emails, you know.
Okay, yeah, no problem at all. So let's see, we have the additional drill. I hosted last month a hot weather tabletop exercise for the towns of Wallingford and Middletown Springs. And one of our objectives, one of our focuses was making sure that vulnerable populations were taken care of and accounted for. And one of the findings that we made during that tabletop was that there was confusion over the usefulness of contacting agencies if the EMDs aren't necessarily sure of who their patients are. And the agencies themselves are not allowed to tell the towns directly who the patients are, unless it's an emergency and unless they already have that signed waiver. So not in all cases. There was also a concern that having 27 EMDs call the social service agencies in a region-wide incident would overburden their communication capacity. So it was recommended in the after action report for that tabletop that we discussed the potential to streamline the calling process. So potentially having the EMDs either call myself or the BEM watch officer so that a single call is made to each of these agencies instead of 27 different calls. So that's something that we could potentially work into this protocol as well at a future date. And the last thing that we have in the pipeline, forming a working group to develop a long-term response plan. I know that's been an interest of several of our EMDs, especially in the context of the binary blizzard exercise for next year, the long-term power outage. So once I get my schedule figured out here, I will try to form a working group from the people I worked with this past spring and see what we can come up with.
I'm just curious, am I the only one that's naive to the point where I wonder why are we doing this when I believe the EMDs don't know who the vulnerable populations are. We're not told. Unless we've come up with a list of some because we happen to know, we don't know who the vulnerable are.
Well, some EMDs do have a list of people that they are aware of who would potentially need help in a situation, just based on local knowledge and neighbors helping neighbors kind of system. Jane can elaborate on that a little bit if she wanted to. But Emily, I see you have your hand up.
Yeah, I did also want to offer, I don't know if this is an area where care is used widely or not, but if you have people that have registered for care, so that's the Citizens Assistance Registry for emergencies, you can contact Tyga as your normal person, and she can work with E911 to tell you how many people in your community have registered and what their needs are. Now, that's only the people who have registered. There certainly could be more, but it at least gives you a sense in the volume that you have that have taken that proactive step to register themselves and what kinds of needs they might have. So I'll drop that information in the chat because during peacetime, you can just get the number and what their needs are. But if there is a disaster on the horizon that's less than 72 hours away, we can get you the de-identified information for that. And by de-identified, I mean identified. Sorry, reverse that.
Answer your question, Marty?
Fine.
Okay.
But I don't know who this other organization is, so it's worthless to me.
Could you elaborate on what you mean by that?
You said there are people who self-register where?
Yeah, it's the Citizens Assistance Registry for Emergencies. I've just dropped the link into the chat. It's something through E911, and 211 helps to promote it as well. It's where individuals can say, I need extra assistance during a disaster. The cool thing is it's not only a, I'm sorry?
So they sent that form in to 911 or to whatever you just said they sent it to. Mm-hmm. What's happening with the information?
So responders, when they respond to an event, can actually see if one of the people on that form is living at that house and what their special needs are. And during a disaster, emergency responders or EMDs can contact the watch officer if you're EMD, or you can contact dispatch if you're a first responder to say, I need to know who's on that list. We've got a disaster happening and we need to know the volume of people that have registered for that.
Thank you.
Yep.
Okay, Jen,
Emily, this is Bob Morlino.
Yeah.
Emily, Tega can tell us, you said how many people in our towns have signed up for it? Just the number, right?
Yep. Anytime during peacetime, we can give you what the number is and what their concerns are. So do they not speak English as their primary language? Do they need transportation and they need special transportation?
But not their name, in a non-emergency, not their name,
Yep.
right?
Not their name. It's just going to give you
okay.
like, it's just going to say you've got 3 people in town who have English that's not their primary language and 2 people who have mobility challenges. That's all it's going to say.
Yeah, okay. I would like to certainly have that information, the number of people for Paulette, but might it just be, I don't know how difficult it is for her to collect that information, but might it just be possible for her to just look over all the towns in Rutland County and just, send that to the EMDs, or send it to Maggie maybe first? Instead of sending it to 27 people.
If that's what you guys would like, we could certainly do that.
Sure, I'd like to
Yeah, why
have
don't
it-
you, Maggie, is that all right?
Yeah, I'm perfectly fine with that.
We can do that.
And then we can, and then we can get the information from Maggie. Great, thanks.
Okay, Jen, go ahead.
I couldn't speak earlier because my phone was ringing, so I had to mute myself. But I want to go back to Marty's comment about really why we're doing this vulnerable populations protocol. And I think that you really hit the nail on the head when you said we don't know who these people are. And how do we find out about them short of maybe doing a door-to-door during an event? I know I found some people that way, but there's a lot of other people that are going through medical situations that I have no idea about. So the whole purpose of this protocol was to reach out to those agencies that are serving those people and offer our assistance if there's anything we can do to help, or if they will at least make contact with their patients and make sure they've got everything they need in a particular situation. And if they don't, try to get their permission to allow us to do a welfare check. Otherwise, we're not going to know about them all unless it's word of mouth. So I really see this protocol as a positive step. It may mean making some phone calls and getting information, or it may mean that there's very little information we get, but I'm going to take that as a good thing, that if I'm not told I need to do something from these agencies, then chances are things are under control for the people that they're serving from Chittenden. I don't know if that helps you.
Sure, it's like anything else. They're gonna call the fire department when they need us. So it sounds like they're doing all these protocols and we're not gonna know anything till the emergency happens and we're called.
I don't know if people are going to call the fire department when, their temperature is cold in their house, or they have a bandage change and the VNA nurse can't go out to get to them because road access is blocked. I don't know if the whole idea is for us to collect that information and work with the fire departments and first responses to do the response activity.
Yeah, and if I may, so this is Eric Pulver with BDH. Anytime BDH, Department of Health.
So, I understand Vermont Department of Health.
Yeah.
I don't understand VDH. Everybody with acronym.
That's what the acronym list is for.
Yeah, we have way too many acronyms. I
Right.
agree with you on that one. I just want to say that what the protocol here is really what we're trying to do is we're trying to kind of get work within the frame of HIPAA. So if HIPAA didn't exist and we could just have all of this information, you guys could just have all of this information, yes, 100% would make your life so much easier. But the protocol here is to try and get those vulnerable populations, the agencies that serve them, at sort of awareness that something might be going on. They need to check on them, because these agencies, they don't have the staff, they don't have the resources to every single person. But if there's a situation, that they will then be aware of, then they can go check on that. And so that's where kind of this protocol comes in. And so my perspective from Department of Health, anytime that we can get more vulnerable populations, just awareness is a positive. And so this is kind of the best way that we keep tweaking to kind of make this happen.
Okay, in the interest of time, I would like to move on. So the BEM Emergency Preparedness Conference is coming up fast. It will be this September, the 20th and the 21st. This year it will be at the Burke Mountain Hotel and Conference Center, which I recognize is quite a ways from here. So there is the option as well. It's basically a venue to share knowledge on a variety of topics related to emergency planning and preparedness. So we'll have speakers, exhibitors for the full day on the 20th and the 21st, and opportunities to get breakout groups and learn from each other, basically. So the registration for that is now open, and the REMC can provide one hotel room if someone would like to make the trip, free of cost, and it will our funds will also help cover attendance and travel fees. So if you're interested in potentially attending in person and taking advantage of that opportunity, please contact me. I will get you set up with the information that you need and the registration form. Other than that, there are the EMD of the Year nominations. This is to recognize any EMDs in the region who have gone above and beyond in their duties. Those are due August 1st. And the link for the nominations, as well as the hotel, registering for a hotel room, will be sent in the email for the minutes once those are ready. So keep an eye out for that. And last thing to wrap up, some binary blizzard build-up related updates. So for the past couple of REMC meetings, I've been slowly inching forward to projects of mine. One of them was the long-term power outage annex and workshop, which was originally slated for next month. I did unfortunately get sidetracked a little bit with some of my other RPC duties, and so we're now going to modify it into a different form. So tonight, Bennington and Windham are having a mini tabletop / facilitated discussion about what they would do in a long-term power outage. And I thought that would be a good format to work with, to allow the EMDs to talk about their potential courses of action and what kind of resources they have and other opportunities to collaborate. So with that in mind, I will still kind of go with the original direction of the annex a little bit, which was essentially getting boiled down to here is a sample checklist of steps you should take during each phase of this long-term power outage. But within the mini tabletop, we will encourage the EMDs to tweak the checklist as needed, depending on if there's a series of steps that would make more sense for them to do, or if there are items they would want to add, resources, people, so forth. So kind of blending two different ideas there. For the working group, which I believe I only have one member of that working group with me tonight, but I expect to have another meeting to kind of brief you more about this pivot. So keep an eye out for that email. And the EOC activation functional exercise that was originally planned for September, for similar reasons as the long-term power outage annex, it's most likely going to be reworked into something a little less complex. So a few ideas that we have floating around right now, we could have a panel where EMDs discuss past experiences they've had opening and operating an EOC and sharing tips and tricks and things learned, lessons learned, and so forth. Or we could potentially have an EOC basics course. This was something that we offered a few years ago, I believe back in 2021 with Rich Cogliano and Stephanie Berg. I still want to do a review of that material and see if it's something that I think is feasible for what we're trying to do. But until then, we're going to try to see how we can make this work and still get something EOC related done in the fall. So it'll probably be pushed further back from the September date. And my apologies. I saw Abigail Spiegelman on here. My apologies to the hospital. I know I promised you guys would participate in this. There might be potential for you to participate in that panel that I mentioned, but I'm afraid that being new to the position like I was means that you're going to try to set some things up and not quite hit the mark. So I appreciate your patience with that. Other than that, other fall activities that I'm hoping to hit on, a local liaison drill, which is something we do every year. And as I mentioned, the no notice vulnerable populations protocol drill. So, okay, with that, I am going to turn it over to Tiana Smith. She is our guest speaker tonight from Green Mountain Power. And among other things, she will be discussing how Green Mountain Power communicates with their vulnerable populations that are dependent on electricity for their health needs. So yes, I will pull up the slideshow, but welcome, Tiana.
Thank you. I really appreciate the time tonight. And I do have a formal slide deck, although I think many of you, this may be like the third or fourth time that you've seen some of this information. So what I really want to do is just kind of have an informal discussion as to what we've been seeing with storms and then how we prepare and to Maggie's point, exactly what we do around what we consider our critical care customers, how we define that, and things that we're doing to improve that system of communications in the future. So next slide. Basically, the overall message is that storms are getting worse. We had 4 of our top 10 worst storms in the last 10 years this past December and March. And so what we're seeing is the warming climate, you know, snow that hovers right around that sort of 33, 34 degrees is extremely heavy, wet snow. We would almost prefer ice storms to that because you can't move around in heavy, wet snow like that. So there were areas where we saw 4 feet of snow in Brattleboro. You can see right there, that's a fairly tall man and it's up to his waist. So simple tasks that normally would take us 15 minutes to complete, we're taking 2 hours. We spent most of the first couple of days with the storm that we had in March just making things safe. And so I'll talk a little bit more about our storm restoration process, but you know, the number one thing that we do during storms, the first thing that we do is make things safe. We work with a lot of town road foremen. We work with emergency medical services. We're trying to get down wires up off the road, and we're trying to get major roads cleared for access. And so, especially with the March storm, the first 2 days we were able to restore in some areas, but we weren't even able to get to storm restoration because of the extent of the damage. Next slide. So December, we had really what it was sort of a continuous storm for us, but again, heavy wet snow. It hit southern 2/3 of Vermont especially hard. You know, again, it's just weighing down our wires, weighing down our poles, breaking poles. The damage continued for about 36 hours. And we restored power to 120,000 people. In terms of the number of customers affected, it was our largest storm, that December 16th storm. And then I remember we had about a day and I wasn't quite ready for Christmas with my family. And instead of doing what everyone else was doing and going and making sure I got ready, I didn't. And we got right into the next storm. So next slide. This was the one that happened over Christmas. I live in Essex, Vermont, so I actually have Vermont Electric. I was out for 5 days. A lot of people were out during that storm. Second highest wind speed ever to be reported at Burlington Airport. Stronger low pressure systems because of that warmer, moisture laden air. Next slide. And then the March nor'easter, and this was the one that ended up being really extended. I actually met with a customer in Westminster yesterday. We installed I have a picture of them, so I'll show it to you here in a second. But they were in a hotel for four nights because they didn't have power, and he's on an oxygen machine. So again, we faced challenging conditions, snow up to the waist. Even as we restored power to the I think, you know, you can look on our outage center, and it's like, it just looked like it was hanging at 50,000 people. We were just taking on more and more and more outages. Talked to our operations supervisor in Brattleboro, and he's like, the snow is not stopping. Next slide. Okay, I'll get to this in just a second. We do have lots of ways which we prepare for storms. We have multiple forecasters, multiple models. Part of the trouble with models is, especially now, the climate is changing, and so it's looking back at historical data. And so that storm in March, it can estimate the number of events that we see, which is actual power outages, and it estimated it at about, I think, 1,500. The actual events that we had were closer to 3,000. So all of that information is what we do in order to prepare, get the number of crews that we need. Mike Burke, who normally comes with me on these presentations, he's our head of operations, and he's been doing this for long enough that I feel like he feels it in his bones, and even doesn't believe the models all the time and gets even more crews and things like that. But that is part of how we prepare for that, and I have a slide on that too. So we aren't just sort of continuing to just pick up down wires and fix broken poles, knowing that the climate is changing so much. We have a lot of resiliency work that's going on. A couple of pictures here. The top is cable and conduit. Before we would have to, and this is for sort of undergrounding, where that's a lot of our grid resiliency work is we plan to underground, storm harden. Undergrounding, that's cable and conduit, where you roll out, we used to have to sort of glue together sticks, PVC sticks, and then you pull the cable through. Now it comes, and it's very cost effective. It comes like that, you roll it out, and then you can energize it. The bottom right picture is a photo of what we consider to be storm hardening. It is steel wire, like 3-inch steel wire that sits on top of the lines. Trees can hold that. I mean, not like, a redwood, but pretty big trees. There was a stretch in Athens that actually had 9 trees on top of it. The power was still on. It allows us to go out there, remove the trees safely. Oftentimes people don't even know that the power has gone out. And then that middle picture shows what we consider to be self-healing. And so we're able to sort of switch circuits, and you may blink off for a little bit, but then we can kind of switch and go from a different area. So just a couple of the strategies that we're using around strengthening our grid, so we don't just continue going out and having to repair the same poles and wires time after time after time. You can see that the graph it's hard to see, it's a bit of an eye chart, but it just shows each color is a different type of disaster and what the costs are associated with it. And you can just see how it's gone up in recent years: floods, power outages, winter weather, and things like that. Next slide. Talks about this a little bit. We have forecasters, we have weather models, and it allows us to sort of do outage predictions. Sometimes it's great, and then sometimes it just really misses the mark. We try to, and we did this ahead of the December storm. Southern Vermont is a lot more used to losing power than Chittenden County and Northern Vermont is. We knew that the storm was going to be getting up closer up north. Those are a lot of people that don't have backup generation at all. And so we did phone calls. We did a lot of outreach ahead of time. We tried to get information into the news so that people had a plan in place and they knew to prepare. So text alerts, things like that. We do pre-position a team normally what I work on at GMP is electrification and sustainability. During storms, I outreach to towns, and I talk to emergency managers, and I lead the team of people that does outbound calls to critical care customers. So we pre-position our own teams. We get crews from outside the area through our mutual aid group, and we do things like that to prepare. Next slide. So this, to your earlier presentation on vulnerable communities, we do extensive outreach to who we consider to be our critical care customers. Probably a little different than who you might think of as vulnerable customers. When we say critical care, these are people that have identified themselves as being on life-saving medical equipment that requires electricity. We have spoken since the last storm because what we're recognizing is that there are those people, but we also have a tremendous amount of people that we would consider vulnerable. And we know that because we're talking to them, we're hearing, I'm talking to a gentleman who's 94 years old, no family, isolated in his home, can't get out, doesn't have any heat. And so that's not somebody that, you know, requires electricity, but certainly needs some sort of a plan in place. And we have an aging state of people that live very rural and sadly don't have a lot of support. And I think that that's something that we learned quite a bit during our calls. The other thing we really stepped up during these 4 really big storms was reaching out to communities. So town officials, emergency medical directors. I was sending out information. We now recognize that that sort of generic, hey, here's a press release, this is what's going on, needs to be a little more tailored for emergency emergency services directors, emergency managers.
Management.
Thank you. Thank you. Too many acronyms all the time, especially with utilities as well. Emergency management directors, town officials to say, okay, you know, here in Rutland, this is what we expect is going on. We know exactly where the issues are. We think by Wednesday, you're going to have power restored to the entire town. People will be coming on between now and then, but really trying to get that more tailored information. So I have a really big spreadsheet of folks that will get sort of generic notes during those really big storms. And then I have information that I can call emergency management directors directly and say, hey, could really use your support. I had a tremendous amount of support, I have to say, from EMDs in some pretty rural towns during the 5-day outage, where I would get nervous after talking to somebody who, again, they're not on life-saving equipment, but they have a seizure protocol and things like that, and they just need some support. They need someone to check in on them, having trouble with access and things like that. So again, we don't want to burden EMDs when we know that you're doing your job during these disaster times. But there was a tremendous amount of support also from DEM during that time. Next slide. There's the couple I met with yesterday. And so I spoke to him during the March storm every day, multiple times a day, because they have a hard time getting around. He is on oxygen. She's dealing with some things as well. And they were stuck in a hotel in Brattleboro and really didn't know what to expect. There are some people that can't afford the hotel, right? So they hunker down at home and cover themselves with blankets and things like that. We installed that battery for him yesterday. That's a Franklin battery. We're trying to figure out more and more of that type of technology that we can install in customer homes, especially for critical care customers, people that require electricity for a CPAP, or an oxygen machine, for a chemotherapy drip, or a home dialysis machine. We're seeing a lot more people doing at-home medical care. So they're released from the hospital. They're not always released from the hospital with a lot of information on what they should be thinking about in terms of backup power. So we have been working, we want to work with the regulators. We've requested we're capped at how many people we can give batteries to every year. It's 500. We want there to not be a cap on energy storage, and we want to be able to give our critical care customers, every one of our critical care customers, one of these batteries. Like I said, improved messaging. So making sure when I'm talking to the towns, I'm giving town specific information. We've talked about in some of the towns where there's very little cell service, maybe even dispatching a GMP employee, from the Colchester office or the Rutland office to go down and on a satellite phone, be able to communicate to the town people. We have our field folks, and their job is to put the power back on, and we have our office folks. And again, everyone has a job during storm restoration, whether it's logistics, talking to customers, things like that. We've met with Vermont Emergency Management a couple of times. We've got coordination going on there. You mentioned the CARES list. That's another thing that we have talked about, whether or not we could share information between our organization and the CARES list ahead of when we're anticipating that it's going to be a really large storm. So that's ongoing work as well. And then tonight, this is my 16th of these presentations, and it's been great. I'm not from Vermont, but I have really gotten to know Southern Vermont in a very lovely way this past year. So just continuing to reach out. And if you know of other towns, emergency LEMPs, RPCs, whoever, we want to come and talk about what our efforts are, make contacts, build those relationships. So that way, you know, when Tiana calls because so-and-so is stuck in their home and, you know, is very desperate, we can support one another. One thing that I want to share with everyone that's really important is that the point of the critical care list is not that you are prioritized for getting your power back on, because that's not the way the grid works. Many people believe if they're on that list, they get their power on first. That's just not the way electricity works. So the transmission lines, at first thing we do during storms is clear hazards. So like I said, make things safe, remove, you know, our crews are in there removing trees from roads as well. So we're making things safe, clearing hazards. Next, we have to repair the transmission line. If those lines are down, it doesn't matter what we do at the subs, doesn't matter what we do at the single taps. Next, we restore to hospital and emergency response facilities. That's another thing we have been tracking really closely, and especially over this last winter, you know, we really understand the critical facilities in each of these towns. So prioritizing those. Then from there, I missed the substation. So it's transmission, substations, making sure from the substations we've got the critical facilities on, and then it's repairing the main distribution lines out of the substation. From there, and this is something that can sometimes upset people, we do go to the outages that are the largest amount of outages. The reason for that is it's just sort of economies of scale. We can get, you know, with not as much work, we can get a greater number of people on. And then sadly and unfortunately, folks that live incredibly rurally who always say I'm the last person on, it's usually because they're sort of the last on the line or the last tap. It takes a tremendous amount of work to just get that one service on. But that is part of what we're doing. So the last thing is restoring those isolated events. I talked about this, but we're across 77% of the state. So GMP serves kind of all but that white area, parts of Burlington, and we have 15 operating districts. We distribute our resources to the hardest hit areas. So that's another thing we can oftentimes hear as well, as like, I'm looking at the tree, just come get the tree. Like, I haven't seen a crew, like, where are your people at? Do they even know? Oftentimes we're working on the transmission lines or we're working on the system in order to be able to get things repaired. But we are, you know, from each of those district offices, there's a storm director, they're managing the crews, they're managing all of the things that are going on out there. And then we are getting resources, you know, during the March storm, they were from as far away as Kentucky. And the reason for that is because that was a New England storm. That wasn't just a Vermont storm. So everyone up here is trying to get crews. We got them from Nova Scotia, Kentucky. It's a really great partnership that we have with mutual aid. And we also send crews. So when Nova Scotia was out last year, we sent 3 bucket trucks and a bunch of crews up there to help as well. So that's our mutual aid group. Next one. And then this is really important as well. I know you all know this, but it's just something that I've been sharing at each of these meetings. There were a lot of people that I talked to that said, I got a guy who's got a truck and he's going to move the line. My brother-in-law has a guy that can move this tree and the power's not on. So I think that the wires are fine. Under no circumstances should anyone ever move a wire. The only people that can say that a wire has been de-energized are line workers, not electricians, not plumbers, not your cousin Larry, like not anybody that has watched this old house. Like, this is, I'm making light of it, but it's a really, really serious situation. And when there's as extensive of damage as there was in the March storm, there's down wires everywhere. And we know it's frustrating for folks, but we do not under any circumstances want people to go anywhere near wires. And I think that that's the last of it. That's me. That's not me. That's my contact information. That's just a sweet family.
You brought up this point about
Yeah.
power packs. I was curious
Yeah.
about that because I haven't seen the promotion like they've been doing for a while.
Yeah.
They did a great big promotion on that. But my question comes in, and my information that I have might be wrong. Good chance of this, that I was given wrong information. But as I understand, in the State House, they had battery supply in the building. And the insurance company made them remove it. Is that a true?
So the insurance company didn't make them remove it. The State House decided to remove it on their own. We have 4,000 of these devices out in Vermont. There has never been a fire. There's nothing additional that people have to do. You put a fire out for a battery the same way that you put a fire out, a regular fire out. All they needed to do was put in some additional, I want to say not scaffolding, but like they could have helped the room in a certain way and not taken those batteries out. They ended up just putting the batteries outside. So there was some misinformation that we tried to correct as part of that. There's a lot of, you see a lot of that, right? It's like, oh, a Tesla battery that caught on fire in the middle of nowhere. And the generators catch on fire also. You know, lots of things can catch on fire. They're not any more dangerous than, they're not dangerous. They're not. And so, yes, they did take that out. I think that they've done the work that they need to do to put it back in to satisfy the insurance company.
Just out of curiosity, those battery packs, I assume they go into the circuit breaker box under its own circuit.
Yes, under its own circuit, yes.
Okay. So there's got to be a way of shutting that battery pack down.
100%. Yeah, you mean if you're going in for a fire or responding to a fire? Yep. So we have given people information on that. It's a breaker, just like you see anything else. When the power is cut off to the house, the power is cut off to the battery. You're right. Well, there's a breaker on the actual battery. So if you go back to,
So on the battery packs themselves, it's a breaker switch.
there. So yes, right where that sweet woman is standing, there's a button on this particular one, and it's a disconnect. Or you can open up the cabinet and there's a breaker right there. And we've talked to some fire departments as well. There have been questions about the large chargers, the fast chargers for electric vehicles, the same sort of thing. Like, what's the disconnect? So yeah, there's a lot of information out there about things catching on fire, but yeah, you're able to disconnect. Yes.
Yeah, I have a question, Tiana.
Yeah.
Thanks for coming in.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. One thing I've noticed this past summer, since these last storms, Castle got pretty hard, was I've seen a lot more of your contracting with tree removal and branches for vulnerable areas where you wait on a tree or bring a
Yep.
line. Is that something that GM Mountain Power has changed in the last 5 years, or is this something that you've taken more of a prevention?
So
I know it costs money, obviously.
Yeah.
But I've seen the difference, at least some of our, for sure.
So we have the ability, there is so much sort of right of way that we're allowed to clear. We have a vegetation management plan. We have a regular sort of cadence with which we may just be in your area. It may just be the time to be doing that. Because I wouldn't say that we're putting any more effort than we have in the past around vegetation management. The trouble, and you know, I was driving with Mike Burke when we were in Grafton. I was driving the line with him. Some of these trees are 100 feet tall.
They're massive.
They're massive.
Absolutely.
And so when you look at the transmission lines, their right of way is, I mean, you don't see anything close to those transmission lines. Ours are a little different, and it's because we don't want to clear cut the state, and people love their trees, and it's part of how Vermont is and how people want to live. And so we really think that the best thing to do, we continue our vegetation management, but is to underground, put it under the ground, so it doesn't matter what the weather is doing, to storm harden so that, you know, we get most of the trees. There might be a really big one that takes the line out. And then the self-healing, so that if a tree does take the line out, we can shift things around and still provide power. And then, of course, when people have batteries in their homes, it doesn't matter what's going on for us, how we're restoring power, because you don't know, because your house is still running. So those are all things. I would say vegetation management, we're doing the same thing now that we've kind of always done. It's just probably the time for us to be in your area. We are doing some cool stuff. So let me say this. We are doing some cool stuff and have been talking about doing some cool stuff with drones, where you can actually, with drones, go and say, okay, just because this area says it's time for us to cut here, and this area says wait another year, we actually should be flip-flopping it. And because we've had a ton of rain over here. So we're trying to do things with LiDAR and drones to better understand that vegetation management. So there's a lot going on technology-wise out there that helps with these kinds of things. So what I would love to do, if it's okay, and sorry for those of you who have seen this presentation 10 times at this point, but what I'd like to do, if I could, is share my information and then share the information I have on my list of all of you and make sure I've got the right contact information. My plan ahead of the storms that hopefully do not show up this winter is to make sure that I have the most up-to-date information, reach out to people proactively. I think you probably all know this, but a lot of people don't have a plan in place. There are a lot of people who moved to Vermont during the pandemic who are not used to living in Vermont, and they live in very beautiful, very rural places that are not New York City and New York. Yeah. So they don't live in New York City anymore. So
it's amazing the way they want to change it to New York City.
Yeah. Well, or, you know, it's what I find amazing is it's like you can talk to the CEO if you'd like. The way that electricity is restored is the way that electricity is restored.
Yeah.
There's no sort of there's no amount of money that you can pay right now to get your power back on before everybody else. So anyway, it was quite a learning experience. And I don't mean to make light of it. It was a very serious thing, and we're working really hard to make sure that we are preventing it from happening, and when it does happen, that we're communicating as best as possible to everyone and keeping people safe. That's it. Hot in this room, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks for the time.
And I've left your contact
Can we get a
information.
copy of your slides?
Yeah, you've got it. So.
Yeah, I'll be sending it out
Yeah.
to everyone along with
Great.
the minutes. And that has their contact information
Okay,
on there.
great.
If you want to reach out to her at any time, you're able to.
Thanks, everyone.
All right, thank you.
Stay
Sarah.
safe.
I'm
Yep.
sorry.
Thanks.
Drive home safe as a
Thank
plan.
you.
I'm sorry.
Well,
What was your name?
It's Tiana.
Yeah, what was the speaker? Oh, it's Tiana. Okay, I'd spoken to her on the phone the last power outage we had. Right. Okay, great.
Hey, thanks.
thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, so.
So- Sorry, I was on mute. I was gonna move things along if we were good.
Yeah, no, go ahead, Michael. But I know you're connected by phone, so I don't know if you have the agenda in front of you or if you.
I did, yeah, I've got it. Something wacky's going on. It just won't let me log into Teams. But so I'm limping along, but it's okay. So,
Okay.
but I did want
Then go
to thank Tiana. We always appreciate when someone from GNP comes along, because that's pretty important infrastructure for us to have, operating during an emergency event. So if no one else has any questions, I think we can move along to the next agenda item, which is REMC representative reports. And did I hear clearly that someone already gave their report?
Yes, so Bob gave his report early in case he lost connection by
Okay.
phone.
All right, so then it's up to me, the Thera SPR representative. I have zero updates about Thera SPR, but and I don't want to get off the agenda topic here, but I am excited to announce that I got to act as an emergency management director in Proctor last month. We had another house fire, which is unfortunate and strange that we've had so many this year, but we've gotten into a routine where the fire department knows that once everything's wrapped up, that we get Michael involved so that we can contact the Red Cross and provide support to the victims of the house fire. And that stuff is really rewarding, although a small task. It's nice to kind of lead. So I guess on from there, we can move on to the IPPW representative, Tom Johnson, if he's there.
Oh, Tom, you're muted. I can mute people, but I can't unmute people. Isn't that handy?
Oh, no.
Emily, go ahead.
Yeah, while we're trying to get that unmuted, I can give you guys just an overview timing-wise. So the THIRA SPR, that happens in the fall, and the IPPW happens in the spring. So you're only once a year going to really have an update on that. And this year's not a THIRA year, so it'll just be SPR sometime this fall.
Okay, excellent. That's good to know. Okay, Tom, looks like you found the unmute button.
Yeah, as I was unable to attend the last meeting, I would yield to Maggie, who has put together some information.
Yep, thank you, Tom. So I will be reporting on his behalf since I was able to attend both workshops. So the Integrated Preparedness and Planning Workshop, or IPPW, the Department of Homeland Security requires municipalities, or the state rather, I should say, to have workshops to develop a multi-year integrated preparedness plan. So an integrated preparedness plan is essentially a roadmap of the activities that Vermont as a whole is going to be doing to improve their emergency preparedness, response capabilities, and so forth. So it's to accomplish priorities that have been identified in the threat hazard identification, THIRA SPR. And this includes things like high priority core capability gaps, which are things that are recognized by FEMA. So for example, planning, public information and warning, and operational coordination are some of the gaps that have been identified through the stakeholder preparedness review process. And essentially the workshops are to find opportunities to collaborate and create activities or game plans to approach closing these gaps in these areas. So there were breakout groups to determine objectives and activities and opportunities for 5 different areas. That is planning, organization, equipment, training, and exercises. And in addition to the RPCs, we had plenty of other players at the workshops. We had the Vermont Department of Health. We had the Vermont Healthcare Emergency Preparedness Committee. We had United Ways of Vermont, the Vermont National Guard, and so many more. So really a great opportunity to have everyone connect with each other and see where we could have opportunities to maybe host events together, try to align our goals with our activities across the region or even the state. So that was a great learning experience for me, having been there, having been at the IPPW workshop for the first time. And we essentially built out a schedule for the next 3 years. The schedule that we built out, we go back to it once a quarter, so once every 3 months, to see if we're on track and if there are items we need to move around or things we need to add or so forth. So that roadmap essentially helps me plan for the next year as well, making sure that we stay on track with trying to fill those gaps and become better prepared in those areas that I mentioned. So that's what that is all about. And okay, I will return it back to Michael.
Cool. So I think.
Oh, one second, Michael. Go ahead, Marty.
Yeah.
Michael, this is Marty Wasson from Rutland Town. My question is, we're talking about this integrated preparedness. As an emergency responder in our area, one of the biggest scary situations we're coming into Is there any news on what's happening with communications within the state? I mean, the state police wants to dump everybody but the state police out of their dispatch facilities.
Yes.
And is the state coming up? Does anybody know if there's a plan statewide or
Yes.
locally?
Yeah, so then in reference to dispatch, they did have a bill, they put together another statewide committee that has representatives from different areas. There's not as many as was when I was on the working group. And they're supposed to have a plan by January 1st, 2024. So everything stays the same until they come up with their plan and their assessment and how it should look and what it should be. Okay. That's it. That's as far as it's gotten at this
So
point.
at this point,
Status quo.
they can't dump us.
Correct. Status
Thank you.
quo.
And Jan, I'm sure you could speak to that too a little bit. The fact that there's been like regional groups getting together to try to figure out what to do from there.
Yeah, it was interesting. I think it was in southern Vermont. There was a presentation by, I believe it was a fire chief up in the Burlington area, talking about gaps in services for fire and EMS and considering a regional approach. This is something that I guess has been well received up in Chittenden County, and he was sharing his discussions about how it might work in other counties, but basically having like one overarching administrative structure, but then having individual departments in each town. There's some pros and cons to it. We can send the link to that discussion if anybody's interested in it. I've not heard any discussion about it as far as Rutland County Fire Mutual Aid, but I have heard it now from 2 different people in the state where they're talking about it. The goal is to allow more response to towns that do not have a large number of volunteers, but it also could potentially increase costs to small towns because there would be more requirements of how they could assist. So it's a discussion point. I think it's an indication that people are looking at, we don't have enough volunteers. You can recruit and you can try to get as many new people in, but some leave as soon as new ones come on. And it's kind of, is it a dying thing, the spirit of volunteerism with EMS and fire on a volunteer basis? So it was just an interesting discussion that occurred in southern Vermont. We'll see if anything gets picked up here in Rutland County.
I can a little bit expand on that a little bit. So
Okay.
the Vermont Care Emergency Preparedness Coalition, which is the big statewide coalition that brings together EMS, Department of Health, hospitals, so on and so forth. They went around the state a couple of weeks ago. They did a southern, a central, and a northern work group with all of their coalition members to discuss mass casualty incidents and possibly, creating plans for that. But one of the things that we found out was that there's not a lot of capacity there for a mass casualty incident in EMS specifically, with a lot of these areas that just don't have the coverage in EMS. And so they haven't put anything out for their findings for all 3 work groups yet, but that's going to be coming here soon. And so a lot of that is probably going to start changing because there was just a massive, surprising lack of capacity or anything like that in EMS in Vermont. So there'll be more coming.
Yep, and we'll certainly keep everyone up to date on those updates as they come out. So sorry for the sidetrack there, Michael. Go ahead with the next item on our agenda.
No, that's okay. And I was going to add, I had a meeting with Mayor Dunn just yesterday, and it was at the very end of the night. If I heard him correctly, I thought he said he was appointed to that, I'm going to call it a steering committee, but that might not be appropriate. So if that's true, I'll follow up with him, and if anybody does want to kind of give feedback, you can send it to my email, and I can forward it along to him. I'm not sure if he's going to be like regional or rep, or I really don't know the intricacies of the committee that's being formed. But I'll follow up on that and send an email out. So, but he did want feedback from everyone. And I don't know if he's at this meeting. Is he?
No, he is not a member of the Regional Emergency Management Committee.
Okay. I didn't know if he was maybe here in public or something, but. Okay, so with that news, I'll go ahead and move on to the next agenda item, which is REMC organizational tasks. The first one is a vote, and forgive us, the bylaws do restrict on how we can, they restrict the procedure for voting on items, but one that it appears that we can vote on tonight is to update statewide LEPC rep term to 3 years. And Maggie, would you like to speak on that any before a motion is made?
Sure. So I provided some copies of the bylaws up front. And so where it speaks to the LEPC rep term is Article 10, Section C on page 2. So the current language is that the REMC shall annually elect from the membership one individual to represent the REMC on the statewide. And there's his exit. So the REMC shall annually elect from the membership one individual to represent the REMC on the statewide local emergency planning committee. So the proposal is to change annually elects to once every 3 years. And we did touch upon this at our last meeting as per the bylaws. The purpose of this change, I just wanted to provide a little more context for that. So Bob is also a member of the State Emergency Response Committee. He was actually, as he mentioned, recently elected chair. So with his appointment being 3 years, it just made sense to extend the LEPC appointment term to the same amount of time. So relatively quick, easy change to the bylaws, but that's the context if you were wondering why we were making this change.
All right, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to seek a motion to update the statewide LEPC rep term to 3 years.
I'll make that motion. This is Jan.
Okay, is there a second?
So moved, second.
Is there a discussion on the motion on the floor? If not, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Oh, the motion passes unanimously. Okay, moving on to the next two items. These are only discussion items so that we can set them up as votes on our next agenda. The first item is changing quorum requirements. And Maggie, I'll go ahead and let you speak towards that as well.
Mm-hmm. So I mentioned earlier in the meeting that the Vermont State Legislature passed a bill that temporarily sets the quorum for all REMCs to 5 from now until the end of the calendar year, so December 31st. And the intent behind this was to allow the REMCs to change quorum in their bylaws because many REMCs were struggling to reach the quorum requirements as were we. I think looking through the records, we've only had one meeting so far where we actually had quorum. So this new arrangement allows us to be able to make that change and make decisions by vote, which before it's only been through consensus. So the current language in our bylaws regarding this can be found on Article 8, page 2. So quorum is defined as a majority of voting members, including proxies being present. That translates into 28 members out of 54 voting members, 2 from each municipality. So this is the traditional definition of quorum, being majority plus 1. But the bill, as I mentioned, allows us to have a quorum of 5. So this allows us to make the decision to modify the requirements. The one prerequisite is that the Zoom quorum must be at least 20% of the membership. So in our case, with that math, 54, 1/5 rounds up to 11. So we need to have at least 11 as a quorum. I personally think it would make sense to have 11 plus 1, 12, nice even number. But really that's up to the committee to decide how we want to modify the quorum. So I leave that open to the members to discuss if you have a preference.
How many members tonight right now?
Well, let's see, voting members, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4. So about 9, give or take 1.
No, we have 9. Brandon, Castleton, Chittenden, Danby, Mount Holly, Pollitt, Rutland Town, Timoth, and Wallingford.
And Proctor, now that Michael has joined us.
Maggie, that doesn't count people that have been delegated by the voting member to be a voting member, the sub representatives to be voting members?
Yes, so the number of in-person bodies we have right now is 9. But for example, Michael, because you're here, you're also representing your emergency services representative from Proctor. So you being at the meeting counts as having 2 people from Proctor, essentially.
I think
Okay.
11. That way the vote would be broken either way. We wouldn't have it even.
That's true, that's a good point.
That's my thing. Because we average probably, I mean, I've been to every one. Always up around 19, 20, right?
Yeah, we're actually
Even
on
with,
higher
even
ends.
with proxies?
Mhm.
Well, this is a news course. It's summertime before the 4th. A lot of people are vacation or something. But I think 11's good, Mike.
Yeah, I agree. Maggie, what was it before? I'm sorry if you said that already, but what was it before?
What was what before? I'm sorry, could you clarify?
For a quorum.
So the quorum, with it being majority plus 1, so there's 54 total voting members. So that means that you need 28 in order to have a quorum.
Wow.
That's too much.
Yeah, and granted, that's including proxies, but that still means, let's assume that,
Never had 28.
yeah, let's assume we even only have half of that, right? So half of 28, I'm not good at math in my head. 14, thank you. Like, I'm not sure we've ever always had that, like 14 different towns at once. I don't think that's happened, so.
But of all the towns we have, we can't have 11 people at a meeting. Like, yeah, I mean, we shouldn't be making changes to stuff. We can't,
Exactly, and that's the purpose of this bill,
so.
to allow us to,
I agree. I think we go forward with it. Then we can get some things done. Maybe we'll get more people coming out, realizing we're actually passing things.
yeah.
That's gonna affect them.
Well,
Alright.
but here, I think I might be phrasing it incorrectly or not understanding the answer. So we were allowed to delegate voting power to our alternatives, correct, in the past, and that's how we came close to. Oh, no,
Yes.
I apologize. I was thinking quorum compared to. No, never. None of.
Mike, she was talking about the bill, the change in the quorum from 20% of 54, which is 11 people. That if that goes by, that would best fit us. That's what I think what we're talking about, right?
So the quorum right now is 5 because of the bill. That allows us to set a new quorum. The new quorum has to be at least 20% of our voting members. So that rounds out to 11.
Oh, got it. I'm fine with 11.
I'm gonna figure out how to turn that setting off. There has to be a setting for that.
I can show you after, Maggie.
Okay, cool. All right, so Mike, I'll leave it to you to lead the motions.
Um,
Oh, wait, duh, we're discussing this,
No.
sorry.
yeah, just, so, yeah, I mean, we could maybe make a motion to, add it as an action item onto the next agenda, but I'm not sure if I don't think that's necessary. So, we know to do it.
Yeah, I don't believe that's necessary either, so thank you, it's been a long night.
It's been a long,
Sorry to interrupt. I lost the signal there. What are we voting on?
Whether to leave you
Nothing.
in this group or not.
We're not. We're setting up a vote for next meeting. So,
Okay.
if no one has any more questions or comments on that, so we can move to the final item under the organizational task, which is it's also just a discussion. Adding language specifying voting membership turnover procedures. I guess just to kind of jumpstart this topic before I turn it over to Maggie. Most of you know I'm leaving Proctor and moving over to become the town manager of Killington. I imagine everyone's clapping, congratulating me. You're just muted. But I've worked it out. To where I'm 99% sure that I'll serve as the EMD in Killington and be able to maintain my position of chair, which I enjoy having. So if you had any anxiety about that, I hope that suppressed it. So
Nope.
Maggie, do you want to touch on this?
Mike, I think that's awesome because you're not going to get out of position anyway.
Yeah. So Maggie, do you want to explain this a little bit?
Yeah, sure. So I guess I'll back up a little. I started this job back in October, and it was at that point the fiscal year had just ended for the REMC, and I made reappointment forms asking the towns, thank you, these two members that serviced us in the past. Are you still interested in serving us? And then I had EMDs and select boards fill out that form and get it signed off on to reinstate the voting members. Since then, I've noticed frequent turnover in many towns of EMDs leaving, moving, and various other circumstances. And so far, my on-the-spot solution has been sending the reappointment form again once we know who the EMD is or their designee, or basically whoever is replacing those representative positions, and just having them fill out the form again and getting it signed off on again. Which I think is a fine procedure, but it's just not something that currently exists in the bylaws. There is no language whatsoever that addresses what should be done when a voting member steps down or leaves the committee. And so I think just for formality's sake, it would be a good thing to add to the bylaws, so that, down the road, a couple of years from now, let's say I've moved on to something, then the next person knows how to handle it. So I identified two spots where I think this would work in the bylaws. Either Article 7, which is on page 2 and addresses structure, or Article 6, which is on the previous page. It could go in either one, really. It's up to personal preference, I suppose. But the language would probably be something like what you see on the screen. In the event of emergency management representative and or emergency services representative turnover, the new candidates shall receive a signed reappointment form from the select board and deliver it to the RPC within 60 days. And that was just an arbitrary number that I set to make sure that we keep our memberships and our contacts and so forth updated at a timely manner upon a vacancy. So are there any amendments that people would like to make? Any discussion, any questions?
Like what you wrote.
Okay, thanks.
Motion's required at the point to add that as an amendment, that we make that Article 6 C.
Article 6, okay. So according to our bylaws, when we propose an amendment, we can only discuss it. And then it's at the next meeting that we vote on it.
Sure.
So that's when we'll officially adopt it into our bylaws along with the new form requirements. But yeah, if everyone is happy with how that looks, then any additional comments or? Okay, hearing none, we'll move on to the next and final item.
Yeah, open public comment.
Everybody here from the public?
As far as I'm aware, no, except for our non-voting members. Emily, go ahead.
Yeah, just a couple of announcements. August 17th, there's going to be a hybrid emergency management director course happening in Londonderry. So that means physically people will be located there for 8 hours if you wish to join in person, or you can call in remotely. Either way, registration is through our learning management system. If you don't have a learning management system account and need to know how to do that, I'm dropping a link in the chat that gives you details for how to register for one. Reminder that the engagement survey went out last week to folks. So this is about a 12-minute survey. Apologies for that. But we ask all kinds of questions about the services we provide, the trainings and exercises and whatever that you need. So if you could please take the time to fill it, it really does inform what Vermont Emergency Management does over the next year. So please, I would really appreciate that. And then finally, there is a nature-based There's a nature-based solutions for mitigating hazard course coming up virtually Tuesday, October 24th, 1 to 5 p.m. It talks about nature-based solutions to climate change and hazard mitigation and all of that good stuff. Registration is actually through the University of Hawaii. We don't get to go there, but we get to virtually go there. And I'm dropping the link as well as the registration code for that in the chat as well. And that's it for me.
Great. Do we get them?
Thank you, Emily. And I'm about to address that. All the links that she's dropping into the chats, I will include in the minutes email. So there's going to be a lot of links in this email, but I will organize it the best I can. And one more. I know that Eric asked for a couple of minutes on the floor, so I will turn it over to him.
Sure. So I just wanted to remind everyone, since my first meeting here was literally my first 2 weeks of starting at VDH, or rebelled. And so I just wanted to put out what I'm doing a little bit and sort of my contact information. I know that coming to the Department of Health is not on the top of everyone's list. So I would like to have, make sure that everyone has that information. So that way, if there is anything that you think is Department of Health related or any questions, that you can email or call my cell phone. I won't promise I will answer it because I'm a millennial and I hate answering my phone, but I will certainly call you back answering text messages. And so beyond that, I do want to try and get out there and, come to every town, meet all of you, see what you have in the way of shelters and, sort of any other questions you may have of Department of Health. And so I'll try and call you or text you or email you or whichever way I decide to do it, or all three. Here in the next 6 months or so, there's a lot of you, and so it's going to be a little bit of a process. But I do want to get myself out there because I do know that the emergency preparedness position here in Rutland for the Department of Health has been pretty well turning over for the last 5 or 6 years. But I'm going to be here for a while. At least 2 to 5 years. And so I want to get a lot of stuff rolling with everybody in the town because I don't want to just be Rutland city specific, which happens a lot.
Where's your role?
Rutland.
Where?
Oh, right across the street at Asa Bloomer.
And is that 809-1747?
Yep.
Okay.
And so since this information, Maggie will put it out again with the minutes, so you'll have it again. But obviously, there's a lot of things I can't help, and without having someone around for a long time, just like one of the things I'm doing is I'm helping Castleton and also Stephanie here at the Planning Commission do their hazard mitigation planning, because there's going to be some updates that you all have to do in involving infectious diseases and invasive species, and that's some areas that I can help with as well. So. That's my spiel. I'll let you go. We're getting late, and I want you all to get home. So,
All right, Michael, do you mind closing for us real quick?
No, we can close it up. So we have another meeting coming up. Sorry, I closed my agenda, but I can open it back up real quick. We have our next meeting is on Wednesday, September 27th, 2023 at 5:30. And then Maggie, I'd like to touch base with you because I'd like to be kind of an involved and helpful chair. So maybe we can meet in the next couple of weeks and strategize an agenda if there isn't already planned activities. And if there aren't any other comments or questions from the committee.
We do have a few. So first of all, I want to address that I apparently made a typo on this slide. It is not September 28th. It is September 27th. That is the Wednesday. So my apologies for that. I will fix that before I send these slides out.
Okay.
Emily, I saw you had your hand up, but I assume it was for the typo.
We had the same.
Yeah.
We had the same. Yep.
Okay, cool. And why can't I put this down? Oh, well, I guess it doesn't really matter anyway at this point. All right. So with that, do we have to vote to adjourn? We haven't really done that.
Yeah,
before,
we
so I
vote to motion. We have to have to adjourn. Would anybody like to make that motion?
I'll move.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? All right. Hey, thanks everybody for an excellent meeting. Maggie, thanks so much for the technical and logistical support.
It's all good.
Yeah, no problem.
And Maggie, I'll stay on the line if you want to talk through that meeting options. It would just be 2 minutes.
Yeah, sure. Let me stop
Nice.
recording here.
Yeah.
Have a good evening, everybody.
Constable. Yeah, okay, I think I remember that.